Greetings, my name is JC.
And I'm Ian.
And this is the Gamer's Gaiden.
And this week we're going to do something a little bit different. JC and I had a discussion a few weeks ago about I was playing something at the time that was a little bit older, and Jay had said, that might be something worthwhile talking about because you're still playing it, and why are you still playing it?
Yeah, exactly. So I thought we could maybe do a few episodes of games that are still worth playing today, that are older games, or maybe even games that were worth playing and are no longer worth playing. Time will tell. But you were talking about Shining Force 2 for the Sega Genesis.
Yeah, this is it's a bit of a go-to for me, to be honest. It has, if you go way back in the episodes, this is actually one of the first RPGs that I ever played. Mm-hmm. So it is kind of important to my gaming history, I guess.
Yeah, so this is like your introduction to the genre as a whole, basically.
Yeah. This was my intro to RPGs, was Shining Force 2.
Like, honestly, it's a good game to get into and have as your first RPG. Personally, I haven't finished Shining Force 2. I've played more of Shining Force 1. But I didn't actually own Shining Force 2 until much later after like the Genesis lifestyle, so that was part of the reason why.
Well, it's interesting because it's the fifth Shining Force game.
Yeah.
Or I shouldn't say Shining Force. It's the fifth Shining game.
Yes.
Which is kind of crazy.
Kind of in the same storyline, if I recall correctly. Because like there's the one that I've like played the most of, which is Shining in the Darkness, which is a dungeon crawl role-playing game where it's very classical, like grid movement, kind of like Eye of the Beholder, for the example.
Yeah, it is completely different. Mm-hmm. They made that hard shift to the like more tactical RPG.
Yeah.
When they went to Shining Force.
Mm-hmm. And that was honestly, in my opinion, us as a North American audience, more colloquially widespread kind of North America's introduction into tactical RPGs, because though they were available for like the Nintendo and other consoles as well in Japan, for example, and there were some on the PC that were older, Shining Force kind of like I saw a lot of more advertising for it and people who had even heard about the game through like magazines and word of mouth and things like that at the time. So what was like the first time that you played it? Was like this a game that you owned or like a friend owned, or?
It was a rental. So there was a rental store not too far from my house. It was mostly movies, but they did have some Genesis games, and I think SNES games as well. But
yeah, those were the good rental stores, the ones with that little small video game section.
Yeah, it would be like one little rack, and on one side you'd have the Genesis games, on the opposite side you'd have the Super Nintendo games, maybe like 3 or 4 NES games if they still thought that was worthwhile in renting. Yeah. But yeah, so this was there. That's where I found it. It was the only rental place in the area that actually had Shining Force 2 or Shining Force anything.
Okay.
I want to say that the Blockbuster that we had in town might have had Shining Force 1.
Yeah.
And I played that many years later as like oh man, I remember renting Shining Force 2 all the time. I wonder what the first one's like.
Yeah. What's your experience with this series as a whole? Is basically like, are the tactical ones that you have the most experience in, or did you play like some of the later iterations which are more action RPGs?
It's kind of interesting because I didn't make the connection kind of initially when I had picked up one of the Shining Souls for the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, maybe. I mean, the font's the same. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's the same kind of, and then it's completely not because it's an action RPG.
Yeah. I know in the fandom, a lot of fans are, you kind of have 3 camps. There's the classic camp, we'll call it, where they're like more, I like the tactical style. And then there's the action, more modern camp where they're like, I only like the action style. And then there's like the moderates who are just like, they're all good games or whatever. But I
mean, that's me.
Yeah. From what I understand, a lot of the lore sort of like rewrites itself or isn't connected in some ways, but it's kind of like still like the Shining IP. But anyway, I'm not an expert. So
what I at least find kind of fun about the action RPG side of it is that they do keep all the units. You have all these different types of units that you can choose from when you were creating your character.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that was neat because I would just be like, I'm going to play as a werewolf.
Parallels. Yeah, Phantasy Star does a similar thing where like the Phantasy Star 1 to 4 is an RPG, and then you have the online games, but like there's a lot of routes from the original game that you can go like, oh, these are like the items from that game or the classes from the original game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You can actually see, although they're vastly different games, but it's still
You can make the connections
yeah, you can
between
make the
them.
connections. Yeah, for sure.
So it's interesting, and for me, I kind of think that this is worthwhile playing now.
Okay.
Because if you're not a big fan of tactical RPGs, or I shouldn't say if you're not a big fan of tactical RPGs, you won't like this.
Sure.
Because it is a tactical RPG.
Yeah, maybe if you haven't tried a tactical RPG before.
Yeah, if somehow you missed any of the many fabulous tactical role-playing games that there
Right.
are available now.
Yeah, because there's a lot of them, and some of them have very simple game loops, and some of them have like overly complex game loops. There's kind of variety for anyone in what they're looking for.
Well, and I find that even in some of the more simplistic kind of tactical games, like something like Wargroove, which I talked about again a couple of years ago. I was really excited for it coming out.
Right.
I was really excited to play it because it was kind of like a fantasy tactical game.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's great. This is what I want. And yeah, it still has some complex systems, whereas this is very simple.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to worry about facings of your unit. You don't have to worry about just everything kind of like dogpiling on you.
Sure.
I find because the AI will only really engage you if you go close to it.
Okay.
That at least because I mean I have been playing through it again, so I have semi-recent experience with it, and I do find that until you get sort of within that range of the units, then they'll move in to engage you. Like as soon as you're close enough that they can get to you and attack you, they'll do so.
Yeah.
But if they can't, they'll just kind of like shuffle a little bit off to the side. They'll still activate, but they'll just shuffle a little bit. They won't draw in closer to you.
This is subjective because it might be different for like many games, but I found that a lot of games, because if they just had like 2,000 points of armies versus 500 points of armies, for example, if they all came at you at the same time, it would not be possible.
No.
So they basically wait till you reach a certain tile or further in order to start moving units. Like a tactical RPG that I'm actually playing currently is Warhammer Battle Sector, and like I found a map where like literally that happened. Like I used 3 rounds to heal my units, and then I moved 2 squares up, and then all of a sudden these units around a little like raised area started coming down and attacking me, right? Like they would have attacked me earlier if like I wasn't like if I was close enough to them. Like it's sometimes it's very obvious in games, and
In this, it is incredibly obvious that they I guess they kind of give you a little bit of a hand. They're like as long as you don't way overextend yourself,
right?
As long as you kind of move up in like I guess in a wave.
I don't remember. Is there time limits to the battles, or is it just like you go ahead and like complete the objective?
I've yet to encounter one that I have a time limit.
Okay, I don't remember. So because like my experience mainly is with the first one, and honestly, it's been probably about a decade since I've played either of them. So yeah.
But
Okay.
it's interesting too because there's this huge different like variety of units.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, they have
you
a
don't
good
just have
rock paper scissors like style combat system where some units are very good against others. They're a complete counter. There's more than 3 types of units, but like you take that like diadem of units and effectively there's a map for it effectively.
Yeah, and it's neat that it's a little bit more diverse than okay, this guy is a swordsman, this guy is an archer, this guy's a X, like
Yeah,
Y.
we're like if you play like Warcraft.
This
1,
guy is a turtle.
yeah.
You know, this person's your cleric, this person's your mage, this person is your centaur.
Yeah, or like if you play Warcraft 1, it doesn't have very many units in it. It's very like, oh, it's a soldier and a range character and like a magic user and like a knight who can move fast.
And your level advancement is based on killing things, which I do find a little bit more challenging. Like you have to kind of make sure that your units are getting experience points.
Because it's last hitting, right?
So that, if you last hit something, you get the bulk of experience.
Yeah.
You'll get a little bit of experience as you're going through, like for hitting or healing or whatever.
Right.
That's one of the problems I have with my healers typically, is because they spend the majority of the time more in the back line healing, and they can't really do a lot of damage.
Right.
You know, if they get into melee with something, they'll hit it for like 1, maybe 2 damage. So you have to kind of be smart about.
Yeah, you'd have to check like a game facts or something like that. But I know there's some maps where like there's specific areas where it's very easy to grind out those types of classes in the game. But knowing like those missions out of the lot of them can be very helpful.
Well, that's a good. It's a good thing you mentioned mission, because that really is the gameplay loop. Because you'll have, you know, these story segments, which might involve a little bit of exploration. You might be able to explore a town or a castle or whatever.
Yep.
And then you'll move into the next screen, combat.
Yeah.
And then exploration, and then combat, and it's just there's no random battles. It's very like mission to mission to mission to mission.
It's similar to Vandal Hearts, which came out a few years later for the PlayStation. You have the epic storyline, and then the related battle, and the epic storyline, the related battle, and you do that for 15 or 20 missions, and there's not very much diversity in kind of branching paths and stuff like that with the game. You're you're very much there for like the tactical battle gameplay loop and the storyline, which they might not be the greatest, but they are enduring, or at least enjoyable to sort of watch through. It's I've always found them kind of interesting because they kind of like build upon themselves as well. Because like even with the Shining Force 1 and going into Shining Force 2, like they are like there's a time gap in between them, but they are like there's relations between the two of them, right? So
yes and no, but you don't have to play 1 to be able to play 2.
Okay.
They are self-contained adventures. The things that really carry over are kind of the setting.
Yeah, and probably
some,
the history.
City names, history. I think there's 70 years, 40. It's either 40 or 70 years between the two of them. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty big gap.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get too much of a kind of crossover on that. Mm-hmm. And I find the units are a big thing for me because each one of them is unique.
Yeah.
Which gets really challenging when you have like 20 units.
Yeah.
How do you keep making each of these units something unique and its own, while at the same time, you know, keeping combat like balanced?
Yeah.
You know, there's literally a turtle. There is for real somebody whose class is turtle.
Yep.
And that is amazing. And he has incredibly low hit points, but his armor is incredibly high because he has a shell.
Yeah.
And just like little things like that. You have the werewolf class.
Right.
You have just all these fun different classes, and then when you hit, I think it's level 10, you can upgrade them at a church.
Yep.
And then you get the like advanced class, which starts then at 1. And you level up from there.
Yeah, that's kind of the staple of the Shining series, where like you sort of like level up in a church, and that kind of like shows a little bit of the difference of the style of fantasy world that Shining Force is in comparison to other ones. For like if you compare it to something such as Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or even Warcraft series. It's very much like orcs versus humans, or like faction versus faction, or something similar to that, or group versus like evil emperor, for example. And in Shining Force, it's very much like a huge diversity of like the turtle, the centaur, like there's the hero, like there's elves in there too, and like inhumans and other different types of interesting classes. Like there's bird creatures in there as too.
Bird
right?
creatures
like,
that have flight.
Yeah.
So they can traverse different terrain.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of neat that they actually like they're able to sort of come out with these sort of like interesting units, because like without technology and like jetpacks or something like that, like how do you, or I guess magic flying, like how do you really like write in a unit that is like the bird class, for example, and like moving in and having like different rules for movement and stuff like that. Well, we'll have like a ton of different like species, for example, like in Dungeons and Dragons, where all the characters are like like a very large group of characters.
Yeah, it's a very diverse cast, which I find really interesting, and it's a lot more fun instead of just like generic adventure A and B and C and D. Like it's like, you know, the cookie cutter, like this is a warrior, this is a cleric, this is a whatever.
Yeah, it's more class based, but they've kind of blended it up with like creatures and class and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, it just makes it that little bit more interesting. And then when they because everything is 2D sprites, you have
because we're talking about a Genesis game.
Yeah,
right?
it's from
like
'94.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it, and I
But
think
the graphics were drawn well, like even at the time, and
Yeah.
like, I would say it's kind of like Mario or Sonic graphics, where like they still look decent today, and like even with like the new releases of them, they have like cleaned up the pixels a little bit and everything, so that it does look good on modern architecture.
Yep.
So that like it is accessible. It's not like a game where is really fun, but it's like you can't really find a copy of this old game because they have never re-released it or anything like that. This is something that actually is accessible. You can get it on Steam, for example.
yeah, and it's like $1 on Steam.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
It's very cheap. I've been playing it on the Switch in the most recent Genesis collection, which is kind of fun because it does have an option to like back out, and you'll see it on the like the like old school.
the swap the graphics between.
Well, no, it shows it on a TV.
Oh, I
Like
see what you mean.
the entire
Like
like
a tube
lobby.
television? Yeah,
The lobby is like this TV screen, and you have a shelf off to the side with all
Right.
the
I
all
do
the
remember
Genesis
that
games.
interface. Yes.
So you just like skim through them, and you're like, yeah, I want this one, and it pops in, and
Yeah.
it's a little bit more fun. But this is also on the 360 era Genesis collections as
Yeah,
well.
or one of the newer ones. Yeah.
From like then to now, it's still easy to find.
Which is good because like it gives next generations of players who are interested in the genre or just curious about different games access to giving them
Well,
a
yeah, because
shot.
if you have to hunt down this Genesis cartridge, this is one of the more expensive Genesis cartridges.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I paid more than $100 for the complete in box. Like,
Yeah.
and that was a long time ago, so I
Yeah.
don't even know what it's worth now.
I know it'll be something ridiculous.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's harder to track down if you want that aspect of it. But if you want just to be able to sit down and play it and see, hey, is Ian crazy that this is still worth playing in whatever year you happen to be watching this? Yeah, it's very accessible, easy to find. So I guess, I don't know, do you have any kind of final thoughts on the Shining Force series in general?
I would say that if you're used to tactical RPGs in the modern day, that you're already in the genre, it would be interesting to look at as kind of a historic piece and sort of looking through it as a lens of like the story is kind of interesting. Are you going to get anything really out of the mechanics? I'm going to go no. And the reason why is because they're too simple. If I
Yes.
compare it to any of the newer tactical RPGs that I've played, I would mainly be going back to it for the simplicity of it and the storyline because it's enduring.
It's an amazing bedtime game. It's like reading a book, right? Like,
Sure.
you know, you have very simple gameplay mechanics.
Yeah.
And then you have the story that you kind of know and love.
Yeah. I would say, so I would say that, and I'm glad that it is accessible because if it wasn't, people probably would have more so forgotten about this game because for some reason, people forget about Genesis RPGs, which is very unfortunate. But the second thing that I would say about this game is that I would say that I think this game is something that they should actually remaster, whether it's something like the Saturn style graphics or of the or Vandal Heart style or Final Fantasy the Tactics style graphics. They just update it so that the models and the backgrounds look new, kind of like how they're doing it with the Tactics Ogre game, for example. They just released that they're like working on like a remaster of that. The exact details I haven't really read into it yet, but that game came out kind of at the similar time, but has like way more, in my opinion, nuanced mechanics and stuff like that. And whenever I play tactical RPGs, I'm 50% mechanics and 50% story. For Shining Force, I'd be more like a 60-40 split.
Yeah.
But I think they should really give it the Resident Evil 2 treatment, as it were.
Yeah.
And kind of like give it a new face, be very respectful to the original content, and story. I know there's some translation issues from like fan translations are more accurately translated, so like fixing all those issues and stuff like that, as well as giving it kind of a new coat. Maybe in an indie-esque style, I think it would do well enough and actually be a good project to do. So hopefully Sega will kind of give it that treatment, or do like a, I don't know, a Streets of Rage 4 treatment where a company does like Shining Force 4 or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, where we actually get kind of a return to form for the Shining Force series.
Yeah, exactly.
With the more tactical RPG and the more kind of fantastical story.
Yeah, exactly. And have it like very much the same and continue on with it, or just like a actual like true like remake and rendition of the game. But I think if you're a fan of the genre, I would definitely check it out. If you don't like RPGs at all, I would say I would look at some of the game if you're interested. But beyond that, I don't know if like a platformer or shooter person would be really interested in it. But anybody who's interested in RPGs, I think, should definitely at least check it out if they haven't.
And if for some reason you still have not dipped your feet into like a tactical RPG, this is hands down the best way to start.
Yeah, for
you know,
sure.
you're not going to be overloaded with
good one to
systems. You're not going to be kind of like, oh man, I have to worry about my facing. I have to worry about units striking me from behind. And I have to worry about getting dogpiled. Because that is something that I do find in some of them. Or maybe I just way overextend myself in a lot of games, which is also probably a possibility. But this, I find, the AI is friendly. The systems are easy enough to manage. Totally worth playing in whatever year you happen to be watching this. So I think we're probably going to do a few more of this video in the future.
Yeah, we've got some ideas in the works, for sure.
So if you like this kind of thing, be sure to subscribe just so you don't miss the next one that we do. And
trying to release episodes every couple of weeks.
We do our best. But if you happen to play Shining Force 2 or 1, let us know what you think about it in the comments down below.
Yeah, what's your favorite part about the series? Why do you think that it's still worth playing today?
Or do you not?
Yeah, for sure. Let us know in the comments.